It's not the police state. It's the prison state. The prison state.
A monolithic and ruthless conspiracy.
A new world order.
A new world order.
A new world order.
Military-industrial complex.
Ow! Man, I'm getting good at that. Okay, so what is the prison state? Okay, well, I talked to you last week and the week before about this notion of inmates paying per day for their stay. So they're locked up. They've paid, they have their fines. They have to pay. Okay, so now this is from the Huffington Post. And this was from the 11/22. Prisoners to work 40-hour weeks. This is a proposal for prisoners to work 40 hours a week. So slave labor. Slave labor. And I know the old mentality of the type of people who say it's patriotic to shop on Christmas and rah, 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 rah. Those are the people who would say they're just dirty old nasty prisoners anyway. And completely ignore the notion of, I don't know, private banks seizing assets, therefore opportunities. No, you're not going into the next paradigm with us. No, you're not. You are not. This was a proposal. Have the prisoners become slave labor, so they can pay their own way and then some. Well, here's the problem. This is not new. Before I get into the privatization of prison, quote unquote privatization, I want to talk about this notion of slave labor in prisons. This is not new. Especially around, I don't know, World Wars times. The slave labor just kind of goes with World Wars. If you don't, which we are in, as I've been talking about, we're in a war. We're in a world war where we have drones, as you just heard from Flashpoints. You got military officers who are protesting. We got drones in 6 different countries plus. And I don't want to steal from Jim Rickards' book, Currency War. I want you to go buy it and read it. Or at least, at the very least, look up Jim Rickards and learn what this guy has to say. Because he does do a lot of interviews about his book, Currency War. But essentially, there's a race to the bottom to shove currencies to the bottom of the heap. Particularly the United States and the Chinese yuan. It's to shove the currencies down as low as they can. And there's this misconception in the United States that, well, we don't export anything, so how is that going to benefit us? We don't export anything from the United States. We export war and war materials. You don't think Boeing is exporting things around the world? We export all kinds of things. Of course, a low currency may not benefit you. Just like it doesn't benefit the workers of China. But a low currency certainly benefits the companies and the banks of the Federal Reserve System. You better believe it. And so that's what the currency war is. It's a race to the bottom. And so as we get closer and closer and closer and closer just to an all-out conflict, and I can't tell you that China and the United States are actually going to literally physically fight each other, although they're going to do it through their satellite countries as described in the book 1984 very eloquently. In the meantime, prisoners are being pushed more and more to do things like work 40-hour weeks or more to pay for their own way, to produce products. Now I'm going to get into the privatization of prisons. Now I'm going to talk about this concept that these private companies that run prisons like Wackenhut and correctional corporations, they trade on the stock exchange based on how many prison beds they fill. So hello, conflict of interest. And at this point, I'm not claiming that there's police out in the streets of Moscow going around harassing people or anything like that. That's not happening. It's not so much a police state as a prison state that's being created. Again, I want to reiterate, it's not so much a police state as a prison state. Okay, and the wardens are the Federal Reserve corporations. Okay, so I'm going to go on with a couple more stories on the prison state. We don't talk about the police state because not yet anyway. We're still on the prison infrastructure state. Okay, this is actually, and it's global, by the way. It's global. Mark David Show is a global show. We have global listeners. Okay. This is from Press TV. Saudi snipers target protesters. And so, like everywhere in the world, and by the way, I started out with Fitch downgrading Portugal's bonds. The protesters in Portugal are taking a good beating as well. Just want to throw that. But anyway, so you have Saudi Arabia, by the way, led sanctions on Syria recently for their aggressive crackdown on protesters. And here, this is from Press TV, Saudi snipers target protesters. And there's a lot of people. Saudi Arabia is really not a very popular country anymore, anywhere in the world. Maybe they never were. Saudi Arabia is about as contradicting and conflict of interest kind of country as it gets. And so they're sniping protesters and condemning Syria. All right, welcome back to the Mark David Show. We're going to wrap things up with some bizarro news. Got some really crazy stuff out there. So,
Where everything is the opposite of things we know.
Be tired of always fighting for truth, justice, and American way.
all right. This is this is from globalistpost.com. This is South Korea is going to have robots. And of course, obviously, they're being tested in South Korea. Robots guarding prisoners. And this is from the article. It says, this is Professor Lee Bao-chul of Kyunghee University. I'm sorry, Mr. Bao-chul, for ruining your name here. But anyway, he says, he assures us the robots are not Terminators. Their job is not cracking down on violent prisoners. They are helpers. When an inmate is in a life-threatening situation or seriously ill, he or she can reach out for help quickly to the robot. Now, let's recap some of the stories leading up to this bizarro story. Okay. So here we're going to have, again, we're taking a global perspective and we're bringing it all in, assuming that what's happening globally is all going to be channeled into one direction. Okay, so you got this proposal of prisoners in private prisons that are being privatized because of the excessive debt the nations and citizens have taken on. Okay? And these private prisons are going to trade stock based on how many prison beds they fill. And then there's the proposal that those prisoners themselves, not even going to talk yet about how they got into that prison, i.e. the war on drugs, fraud, but the prisoners themselves are going to pay for their stay and they're going to work at least 40 hours a week. That's all the proposal. And now they're going to be monitored by robots. What a great idea this is all coming out to be like. And it just makes you wonder, is this going to be a situation where it's like, okay, you go along with the agenda, or you go to the robot farm and work building the war machine. You know, again, if the from their statements themselves, the people who are taking charge in Europe and taking charge of this banking crisis situation, we are going to become a global government so that we can all come together and create something stable out of the crisis. Okay, so assuming that, what happened? And South Korea is one of our primary allies. Okay, assuming that, what they're doing with prisoners in South Korea will probably eventually carry over to what happens to prisoners everywhere. You just assuming, no one said they wouldn't, right?